Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Path 11 podcast. I have an extraordinary guest that is on our show today, and it is just true to my heart because I absolutely love music. As you can see, I've got the guitars behind me. Music is my life. There is not a day that goes by that I am not listening to music in some capacity. And I stumbled upon a very spiritual musician. This singer is phenomenal. If you want to be transported to some other realm of spirituality, you have got to get her in your earbuds and you have to listen to her. She is amazing. Her name is Sangeeta Kaur, and she's a classical crossover new age singer and composer. She's revered across the globe for her breathtaking recordings. And when I say breathtaking, her voice takes my breath away. Mesmerizing live performances. And as memorable as her music is, Sangeeta sees a higher purpose to her art, which is why we invited her on the Path 11 podcast. She feels that her art is all a part of her deeply personal journey and holistic approach to life, love, and spirituality. We're going to hear about her spiritual awakening that occurred in 2009. And we're also going to hear about how she really feels like there is a bridge between her music in the earthly realm and the spiritual realm. So, Sangeeta, welcome to the Path 11 podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and really excited to just talk about all of these beautiful elements of music and spirituality. My favorite.
Yeah. Me too. I am hoping, with your permission, that for our podcast listeners that listen through audio and maybe they're not actually watching the video, but people can come over to Path 11 TV and watch this podcast for free. But maybe we can even do an intro and an outro of your music and kind of bookend it a little bit would be nice.
That would be beautiful. Yes, I'd love that.
Yeah. So, your name came across my desk. And first of all, you're just breathtakingly beautiful. I have to say that. And the cover of it's your album out right now, Illuminance. Am I pronouncing that right? Yeah, I was just like, oh my gosh, I didn't even hear you. I just saw you and was drawn in. And then I began to listen. So before I even said yes, I said, well, let me check this out. I have a pretty good ear for music. And I was just blown away. It was so beautiful. It's so relaxing. You definitely have a gift. And your mom and dad knew that early on, right? And you also have a really interesting upbringing, which is where I'd like us to begin. And I'd like you to talk about how you had two parents. Your mom was a hardcore Catholic, your dad was a hardcore Buddhist, and you were practicing both religions as a young girl and kind of blending the two. So let's talk a little bit about that and kind of how your life progressed to come into the beautiful voice that you have now and the music that you're making.
Yes, absolutely. So, as we know, there's never a coincidence. There are no coincidences. Things always happen for a reason more than you can even imagine. And some things that you don't understand until so much later. So, when I think back of my childhood, I just really remember being so sensitive and inspired by sound, by music. And it's, as a child, you're not thinking anything. You're just kind of feeling and experiencing this experience. And so, as I think back, I know that I've always been a child of music. I was born to have that relationship with music. It wasn't really till later that I really experienced like, oh my gosh, but this is my path. So it started, I always say, oh yeah, my spirituality, my awakening started so much later. But in the beginning, my parents, they were amazing. They come from two completely different spiritual backgrounds. My mom's side, they are devout Catholics. They live it so deeply with it in their hearts. My father's side, they're devout Buddhists. And they also live with it so deeply in their being and in their hearts. And, when I was a kid, I really didn't understand either. I just followed along, went to church with my mom, went to the temple with my dad on another day. So, Saturday temple, Sunday church. And it was just sort of a normal thing. But we know that, up until you're a certain age, and some cultures and lineages say about 11 years old, everything that you're exposed to up until that point is your absolute foundation on every level, whether spiritually or not. So I just felt, and I feel so blessed today that even at the moment, maybe I wasn't even paying attention while I'm at church or at the temple, just sort of seeing it as something different. It really, I feel like it created that foundation for me. And so even though many, many years later, did it finally kind of spark something, it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm just so grateful for having that experience and having my parents come from those two really strong backgrounds.
Yeah, very interesting too, because I was brought up in more of a Catholic tradition, household family, but now I practice more Buddhism. But I still love so many of the rituals of the Catholic religion and, the saints and, praying and, just the art of all of that. So I think it's all good when it's all based in love. Now, I know your dad really inspired travel in you too, right? He would take you, all around the world. And I know that maybe we could also talk about too what your background in music is. I know that you studied some opera. So maybe kind of take us from childhood into maybe teenage college years and what it was like and, traveling with dad and going to school and what you studied.
So my dad is an engineer, but so I'm Vietnamese. Both of my parents are from Vietnam, and they came over here after the fall of Saigon in 1975. So they didn't actually know each other in Vietnam. They met here in the United States and married here, and then obviously myself, my brother. And so while he was in Vietnam, he used to fly helicopters. So it was just something that he always loved and he was a part of. And so when he came to America, the first thing he's thinking to study is something that had to do with airplanes and engineering and that. So he did. He became an engineer and he started to work for the airlines. And so he's really like a kid at heart. And he loves adventure. He loves to explore. He loves to travel. And for some odd reason, even me as a teenager, he just wanted me to have that experience. I don't know if it's because he didn't get to do all of that himself, but he wasn't afraid to let his kids go and see the world. So I started traveling because of him. We did a father-daughter trip for the first time for me going to Vietnam. It was just us. He introduced me to that part of his world and mine. And he was the first one to take me over to Europe, to France, and to kind of see this. I mean, when you're that young for the first time, and back in the day, it was so different. Traveling was so different. You really felt the culture shock. Nowadays, you don't totally feel that. So he, I think, opened my eyes up to so much more, and history and culture and art and all of that. So that really, again, ingrained my entire life and put that into my consciousness, So growing up, I just loved traveling and seeing the world and exploring, experiencing and learning about people and all of that and connecting and then language. I speak 3 languages now, but because of my operatic background, in school you have to study pretty much every language that has anything written in opera. So we had to learn, Russian, French, Italian, German, even English diction, how to sing properly in English.
Wow.
So I just feel like everything from my childhood inspired me to see my path a little bit clearer without knowing it at the time. It's just something I felt called and connected to, so I followed it. It wasn't really easy in the beginning because, yes, my parents were a little bit more open than most Vietnamese families, I think, but still a Vietnamese young woman or even a young man doesn't pursue the arts. It's just not what you do because especially with that generation and the generation before, who struggled in war and, suffering and not having enough and survival. So that was the embedded thing in their consciousness, right? That they kind of projected onto me. I mean, this is such a normal thing that happens to everybody. Our parents project their fears, their worries, out of love for their own children. So that was their projection on me, that you had to have a job, that you're going to thrive and make a lot of money. So the arts was just kind of out of the question. But, based on my character and, I don't know, my stubbornness, and you'll even see it in my charts. A stubborn and driven Capricorn.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it was always hard for me to take no for an answer. And only because when I really felt strong about something, there was just nothing that could get in my way. I mean, I don't know. I honestly, I'm not sure where that came from. I think it just came from source. I think it was God's plan to give me that personality too, because I wouldn't have been able to push through and have all of these life experiences and choose the path that I had chosen. So all of that. And I went to school. I just said, okay, I'm studying biology, but secretly I was minoring in music, learn as much as I could. I just wanted to learn. And so I did. And finally I graduated. I got a bachelor's. They were fine. When I went off for my master's degree in music, my mom, she's adorable, but she did ask me, honey, what are you going to study again? She's like still not totally certain that I'm choosing the path of music. And I just said, Mom, I'm going to continue to study opera, and all of that kind of just, I went away. I went to Boston. I took my step away from home. And it wasn't until when they finally came to my concerts, recitals, and I guess to them understood there's something there. Mm-hmm. And they really saw the joy that it brought to people. And this was before I knew anything about spirituality. This is just music stuff, They saw the joy. They saw, oh my God, my daughter really does have a talent. And so they kind of let go of the reins a little bit, loosened up a little bit. Not until should we go into like what happens next?
Yes, keep going. I am all ears.
So I finished grad school. I went to Italy and I lived there for 2 years to kind of continue and study and learn Italian and sort of just kind of get deeper into the culture of music and Europe, where it all kind of came from, classical music. And so there was a moment I remembered, I just realized everything was against me. This was like at the end of the 2 years in Italy, which was just the most amazing, amazing time of my life, that I felt that it was pushing me to leave. And I just said, why isn't, at the end of it, nothing is working out. I can't get a work visa. I'm just kind of struggling here. I can't really do and pursue what I want to. And I was dating someone at the time. And his father just took me into his library. I was kind of starting to do a little bit yoga up in the attic and pretending to meditate. I didn't know. I never had a teacher. I never went to classes. I don't know. I just tried, and this was like in 2008. So we didn't have access yet quite much to a lot as we do now. And so he would see that I'm meditating and doing yoga. And so he showed me his library one day. This was like at the end of my 2 years there. And in his library were books full about yoga, philosophy, practice, Buddhism, all of this, right? At the same time, I'm not into that quite yet. I didn't really understand it. I'm seeing all these books, and I almost remember what they look like, because later I remembered the books that he had there. I was like, oh my God, I have these books now, and that's amazing. It was the kickstart to my introduction to all of that. I didn't know at the time, but it was those seeds starting to ripen and reveal themselves to me again,
Wow.
And it was just sort of guiding me. It was only about maybe 2-3 weeks later that I had to leave, and I didn't want to go back to California, where I came from. So I went to New York to kind of get into that whole crazy music circuit, audition, get a job, get a place to live, struggle, just push through, audition, get that dream operatic job, get on the stage. Oh no. I was only there maybe 3 weeks. I got my job, I got my apartment, but my boss at my new job says, oh my gosh, you're an opera singer. One of my clients is an opera singer. Go, here's some tickets. She's waiting for you. She invited you. Perfect. I show up. I meet this random person who felt this call to just stick his face in my face and say, hi, who are you? I need to know you. This gentleman turns out to be my very first music producer, who happened to also be a really profound and devoted Buddhist meditator, practitioner, big time yogi, just an amazing being that in my first 3 weeks of time in New York City, invited me and showed me every spiritual center, took me to all of these amazing yoga classes with, I don't know, you probably know some of the names, Dharma Mitra, going to Jiva Mukti. I was introduced to Tibetan Buddhism at the Three Jewels down in the East Side. I mean, it happened so fast, but yet, it just felt so natural. Like, I didn't really understand any of the philosophy. I've never studied it before. But when I first sat at Three Jewels at the Tibetan Buddhist Center, hearing the first meditation class, sitting and meditating with a group and with an incredible teacher named Punsok, who remained my teacher till this day, I felt like everything he was saying I had heard before. And it felt like not only joyous and enlightening, but it felt like a relief. Like finally somebody is saying something that makes sense. Because all of these questions probably were always there, built up, but I didn't even know that I had them. I think I had joy, but I always felt like something was missing. But without having guidance, without even being introduced on this level, you don't know until you're exposed to it. And it just sort of hits you, in the head, like, oh my God, what happened? What is this? What's happening to me? Why does this all make so much sense? I'm changing. And the more and more classes I went to, I just became obsessed almost to needing to know more, to learn more, to understand more, because it's just little bits and bits are just kind of revealing itself through me too. And more questions are coming, and more answers are being answered. Questions are being answered. And it was such a strange and the most amazing experience. I tell people I moved to New York City, this hustle bustle city that everyone knows, the city that never sleeps, to pursue something in the arts. And I came out completely awakened, not completely, but a touch of that completely shifted my life forever.
Wow.
I mean, the teachings that we had were so profound. I felt that the subtleness that was happening, the way that things were taught I don't know. I mean, it's like it's really hard to find some of these teachings for me now. I think that it's so diluted these days. There weren't a lot of places to go back then. And so everything was so authentic and very pure, from pure source and traditional. And so as the years come by and we're seeing so many places opening and spirituality just hitting, mainstream. And I feel so grateful to have had that time in my life to be taught by such incredible teachers that were teaching so purely. It's all of that really transmitted into everything that I do now. And with the music, I mean, I can't just do opera anymore. I feel like creatively, this is my way to communicate and to share and to help others. And it's not about, pushing it in their face anymore. It's for me, it's my path to be subtle, to be gentle, to put it out there, to reach those who are kind of on the verge of having this experience of their own, and to have sort of a place for them to have refuge through music, to feel this connection with source, but it doesn't have to be so like, this is what you have to do, and otherwise you're not going to, achieve anything, and you're going to come back to this life. It's like, no, let's do it with love and gentleness. And I mean, every song is a dedication to some degree. It's it's definitely changed my life in every way, all these experiences.
Okay, so I'd like to ask you some questions about the albums, because you have quite a few. Let me grab my notes here. I counted, so I subscribe to Spotify. That's where I've been listening to your music. And I see on there that you have 5 albums from 2016 to 2020. Mm-hmm. When you listen, I am sure people have told you before that you sound like an angel. There's a very angelic quality and like ethereal type of vibration in music that I feel when I listen to you. I mean, your voice with a few of the albums that I listen to, it's like a very high octave, right? It's like you can really get up there in those higher realms, which I feel like activate my upper chakras when I'm listening to you. Definitely like starts from the heart and just kind of like brings me up. I feel like I'm floating. But but I mean, the music, it just really feels like you're connecting into different dimensions for me. And the music, when I listen to you, it transports me. There's a meditative quality, there's a quality of beauty, there's a quality of calmness, but I immediately felt like, I feel like I'm in the angelic realm. So, I'm curious to know, because I know that you've said before that you feel like you're a bridge between earth and the heavenly planes. And I'm always really curious to speak to musicians, because I know that their right brains are a little more activated, right? And when we move into the right brain, that's where we have more access to our intuition. That's what kind of gets activated when we're in meditative states and allows us, I would say, more entry into realms that we can't see with our physical eye. So I'm curious to know about your creative process, with the awakening, with all of your spiritual teachings that you've learned. Do you go into deep meditation? Do you feel like you're channeling some of these notes or songs that are coming through you? And I just kind of like want to hear more about that connection as an artist, hearing the music before you compose it or create it. And do you feel like there's something guiding you? And maybe even from different realms. Maybe it's not just God. Maybe there is an angelic realm that's coming through or something else. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I love this topic so much. I mean, so that period, right, in New York, remember I was just singing classical music, and I discovered before I started really going deep into yogic practice, I discovered when I'm singing, and I used to spend hours in the practice room, we have to be so aware of the body. That is, we call it acrobats for the voice, right? Vocal acrobats. But you can only create these sounds when you're so connected to the body and so aware of the body. And obviously the breath. I mean, this whole thing is just so fascinating to me, and it's beautiful. So when you sing, even my teachers who weren't practicing meditation and yoga would always remind me, feel your feet, feel the ground, feel connected to the earth, feel grounded. And then when you're singing into the ground, into your feet, into your legs, into your hips. The breath, the navel, everything starts at the core, and then expansion. I mean, listen to the words just right there. The expanding of your lungs, expanding of your chest, your back. Feel the vibration here in your chest, in your navel. All of these terms and instructions. There are times when I would be instructed, feel the vibration here at your forehead. Okay, at that note, let it just come out of the crown of your head. I mean, this was like zero spirituality, had nothing to do with these lessons. But as you can hear, this is what we had to do to sing. This is the stuff that we had to focus on, our breath, our connection to the body, these points in our physical body. When I started to study yoga and meditation, like so deeply, I was blown away because I realized, oh my gosh, that was my form of meditation. And I didn't know it at the time, but like it was doing something to me on a subtle level. And my pranic body, my breath, I mean, we meditate on the breath. When we're singing classical music, you are meditating on the breath. And when you can, that's when sound comes out so purely, with so much ease. When you see some of these opera singers sing, you can feel them. I mean, it's like it does something to your subtle body, which then projects out to the listener, and it reaches the listener. They don't even need to know what you're singing about, but they feel something. They feel some kind of connection to something. And I always think, no matter if you're really conscious or not, if you're singing and performing on that level, you are channeling, right? But it's even more profound when you're conscious of it, when you're aware of it. So, I was introduced to mantra, obviously, these years when I was in New York. So that producer of mine would just ask me to come over. Hey, I have this song. Can you just read these words and sing this melody? They're mantras, Sanskrit, Gurmukhi, Tibetan mantras, beautiful, powerful mantras. And I'm singing them for hours, not knowing what I'm singing, but I'm feeling something.
Wow.
Right. All I want to do is keep coming back. What do you have next? What is that? Can you show me something new? So when I finally understood what all of these mantras were, I became so fascinated, and I wanted to study them and sing them myself and write music for them myself and practice them with my meditation. So all of that sort of developed so much deeper later. But what happens when you chant mantra, it is connecting to God, it is connecting to source, it is connecting to your higher self, it is vibrating all of these points of you, energy points. It is affirmation. It's medicine. It's pure medicine. And the way that you sing is an offering. It's a dedication. There is no you. There's no sense of ego. There's no sense of you. You are just connecting. And so I feel that practice of mantra, I can't sing anything else without wanting to have that same experience. So whether I'm singing an operatic piece, a Broadway piece, a contemporary piece, a love song, whatever it is, if I'm not feeling that same kind of energy that I do when I'm chanting, something's wrong. It's just off. Because I feel like in any type of song, you can connect to a higher place, and that song will affect somebody in a more positive way. And through the years, I really made a choice as well of like what songs to sing. If they're not my own, what songs do I want to sing? What kind of energy do I want to continue to put out into the world? That's why I left the opera world, the mainstream opera world. Although I love the music, I just began to choose exactly what I thought would still benefit people, at least coming from me. Because again, I can't sing a song without connecting to God or to source or to the universe. Yeah, it's just not there for me anymore. I feel like I want to become a more responsible artist, and I want to have more effect and impact in the music. So my process when I'm writing, I've never seen myself as a writer before these albums, because I always sung dead people's music, like old operas. They're not mine. So I never practiced that. I never exercised that muscle to actually write. And when I did, it started off writing songs for mantras, melodies for mantras, and chants, and being able to use it for meditation. And, I really just go into that place of getting out of my own way, knowing that I'm human, I have an ego, I have all of these human things, and if I really want to use my music to share to people and have it used as medicine and to be something uplifting for them, I need to get out of my own way. I can't think about, how does this sound? Are people gonna like it? People who are not into mantra music, who know me as more classical, are they going to accept this? Am I going to, like, there could be so many things that run through your head. Am I pronouncing this correctly? I mean, it's like, just stop. This is not about you. This is for the listener. This is to benefit them. Just connect to God, connect to your higher self, and just chant. And so no matter if it's a mantra or if it's a classical piece, I try so hard to just get out of the way, because I am channeling. We are channeling all the time. It depends. It's your choice what and how you want to channel to the listener.
So I have to ask you another question, though, because you're touching on something that I have written down. Because your first album, 2016 album, I might pronounce it wrong. Is it Niguma? Niguma. That has, all the mantras, right? All these different mantras. And I had that playing. I just like having it on, to be able to absorb all of that. And I have kind of a funny story. One of my teachers and healers had noticed one year that my throat chakra was really closed. And she said, "Have you ever chanted before?" And I'm like, "No, and I only sing in my car, and I don't sing in front of people or anything." And I'm like, chanting. And so she told me about it. And then I went to a yoga studio with a good friend of mine, and neither of us had been exposed to kirtan music or these chanting. And I remember feeling really uncomfortable. And I'm like, I'm not going to sing. There's no way I'm not going to sing and do this. But what happened there, I was sitting and I was listening to these mantras being sung, and all of a sudden I was crying unconditionally. Tears were just pouring out. I'm like, what is going on? I have to study more about this, right? Yeah. So I have to let our listeners know that you pick some beautiful mantras. One of my favorite is the Om Mani Padme Hum. I believe that's yeah. I think that's a heart opener. Yeah. So
opener, that mantra.
Yeah.
The Dalai Lama's mantra.
Oh, we
And
have to talk about that too. Your
yeah,
connection with the Dalai Lama. Oh my God, we have so much. Okay, let me ask you this question. You said I choose songs that they have to make me feel that vibration that like these mantra songs do. Why did you put on the Mirrors album Dust in the Wind? Because synchronicities, for whatever reason, my
yeah.
senior high school class, we decided that was going to be our senior year song. We sang it at our graduation. I had girls that were in my class that were in choir, and they could harmonize really beautifully. They would sing it on the bus all the time when we would play sports. So for some reason, it became our senior song. Why? Yeah. So what does that song mean to you? Because I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Interesting, right? For me, when I hear that song, it reminds me that, like, that exactly, we are dust in the wind. It's, for me, it really came from a place of impermanence. When I hear the lyrics, I know Kansas had, their own interpretation of it and why they wrote it. But for some reason, for me, it just reminds me of the teachings of impermanence, that we're this body, this life, everything that we're seeing, our experience, all of this is impermanent, that nothing lasts forever, that we are the dust in the wind, and we will always kind of become something new. This body is impermanent, but our souls are infinite. And so this body will leave us, it will become dust, will fly off, but will become something else, will be reborn into something else. And all of that kind of will touch and affect everything around and everyone around. And it transforms. We're constantly transforming from everything and from nothing. And we are that dust in the wind. It just, to me, I'm like, oh my God, this song is about impermanence. I wish I could ask them why they wrote it, what it meant for them. But yeah, it just kind of jumped out at me as that. And it also reminds me of a very famous Vietnamese song. It's called Gat Bụi, which is also, it translates to almost like dust as well. And the composer who wrote this, when I listened to it, the interpretation is very similar. And so I thought, wow, this is like Dust in the Wind. And then I'm listening to Dust in the Wind. I'm like, oh my gosh, these songs they have so much similarity. And the meaning behind it for me, for both of those songs, is about impermanence. So I wanted to bring in that Mirrors album because it was much more intimate. It was just guitar, piano, and vocals. And I wanted a cover song that had a strong message, and that the words can really resonate with people, and especially those who, again, are like awakening or on the verge. It's just sort of like, whoa, it could spark something with this song so familiar, but with such a profound meaning behind it. I just love that song so much.
I love that song too. So I thought that was
so glad that it was a part of your life too.
It was, yeah. And I always look for these small little synchronicities with each guest that I have. I can always find something. And I was like, whoa. And I remember I was like, oh, when I saw it, I was like, oh, that can't be like Dust in the Wind, the song that I know. And I'm like,
Dust in the Wind.
I'm like, it is. That's so cool. So, all right, let me ask you another question too, because I know my listeners would love to hear more about your relationship with the Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
So, and talk to me about that. How did you come to meet him, and what was it like to be in his presence? And I know you're still, you still have a relationship with the Dalai Lama. So tell me more about that.
So the teacher that I was telling you about, named Punsok, the one that I was studying with in New York, and who is still so very dear to me, part of the Tibetan tradition is finding your heart teacher. And in this tradition, there's also sort of this thing that happens where you have to ask 3 times. So back in the day, like thousands of years before, one teacher would take on a student maybe every, 12 years, something like that. Nowadays, you just throw them all in one room and, we can do this together. It's so different. And So you're supposed to ask 3 times. When you really feel called on someone to be your teacher, you ask them 3 times at some point in your life. And I remember with Punsuk, I don't know what happened. After a class, he always does little private meetings if you have questions. So after class, I went to see him, and I remember the room wasn't huge, but he was sitting at the end of the room on his cushion, but it felt like he was a mile away. Something was happening. And I just knew that I had to ask him to be my teacher. And I was so new to this whole practice. But as I'm, traveling that mile to get to him, I'm sweating profusely. I mean, now when I think about, I had to purify in that seemingly 1 mile sprint to get to him, where it was just across the room. In reality, it was across the room. But I was sweating, and I was like, oh my God. And I just remembered getting onto the floor and asking him, "Punsuk, will you be my teacher?" And he just sort of was like, "Oh, wow, but I don't know what I can teach you." And I just kept asking him. I asked him the whole 3 times, and he finally said, "Okay, I will try my best." It's sort of like this joke, this sort of silliness, but it was something I felt so strongly about. And so Punsuk started to guide me, teach me about these meditations, these practices, these very old, ancient wisdom teachings. And eventually he said, you need to see His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. I think you need to study with him and learn more from him. And so Punsuk kind of pushed me in that direction. And so when His Holiness came to New York, I immediately said, I'm going to go see him. And but he comes and speaks to thousands of people at once. And how are you ever going to meet him? So there's this monastery that is in Connecticut. And I would go there every now and then to study with the monks up there. And that year, this monastery happened to host His Holiness. So every time His Holiness comes into town, there's always one temple that will kind of host him and take care of logistics and such. And so it happened to be that one that I was going to all the time. And I remembered standing outside waiting, and it was a tiny little monastery, but there were only about 50 of us because nobody really knew about his arrival to the monastery. So I just was there, and he came out of the car and, greeted everybody, shook everyone's hand. And I'm sort of like, oh, wow. And then as he's entering the monastery, most of the people sort of turn around and they start to leave. And I'm just like, no, I'm going to sit here and stand here until I don't see him anymore. I don't know. I'm just so drawn by this being. And as everyone's leaving, I'm still there with a handful of people. His Holiness turns around and he looks at us like we're kind of like confused. Like he looks at us confused and we're looking at him confused. And he starts to wave and say, well, what are you doing? Get in here. And so the remainder of the people out there were like, oh my gosh, really? So we all go into the monastery, and it's this tiny little room, and we're sitting here with His Holiness, and he starts to talk and teach, and a very profound lesson. At the end of it, he wants to take a picture with everybody, and so he says, okay, and so we're all getting in line, standing there in front of the photographer, and he just is right next to me, and he looks over at me, and he reaches his hand out. He wants to hold my hand, and I'm thinking, okay. So I just take his hand, and I'm holding his hand. And I have the photo of this, and I'm just like in a completely other state. I take this photo, and then the photographer says, wait, everyone move over 2 feet. So then, we let go of hands, and we move over 2 feet. And I'm still kind of like just in this blissful state. And then he looks at me again, and he reaches for me again, and he takes my hand. We're just here holding hands. And I'm thinking, what is going on? And I just thought, oh my gosh, is this real right now? So this is like my first interaction with His Holiness. And from that year forward, I would I know his schedule where he's going to be in the United States every year that he comes. And so I would just attend those places and assist and help. And always, at some point or another, there we are again, face to face, eye to eye, and having this connection that I just never imagined would be possible. And then the following year after that, I mean, every year there was some sort of encounter. One year, he comes to California and he says, there's a lot of Vietnamese people in Southern California. And he says, I want to come back the following year to speak to just the Vietnamese people. And I'm thinking, amazing, right? So I get a call from a woman in Canada asking me, because she kind of it's just this connection with the Buddhist community. And she says, do you know a Vietnamese Buddhist temple in Orange County? And I said, yeah, I know a ton, but I know one in particular my family goes to. So I kind of recommend that. Next thing I know, I hear the news, His Holiness is coming back to that temple that my family goes to. My uncle does the gardening there. My aunt cooks for the monks there and the nuns there. So he arrives the year later. There I am again in Vietnamese temple uniform, greeting him on stage, standing with him. I mean, it's always these really close encounters that I have to pinch myself every time. And, it's the most beautiful connection. I had so many visits from him in my dreams. I had a dream about His Holiness. He had come to my house and he was tired and he was hungry, but he really wanted to take a nap. And so I said, of course, come. I put him in the guest room and he gives me his little sachet, the little bag of his that has all of his relics that he would put down on his altar. So it has, the dorja, it has the bell, it has his little Buddha figures, all of his little important items in his little sachet. And he gave that to me in his dream. And I just remembered laying it out on the bedside bedside table, and tucking him in to bed. It's like these kind of visits in my dreams. And we know the dream is another dimension.
Absolutely.
It is another reality. They are just as real as this reality, this dimension here. It's just that we are so focused and absorbed into this space. We're learning, right, how to kind of move into other dimensions consciously. So that was, it's just kind of a constant connection like that with the Dalai Lama that I've had through the years. And it's just so beautiful.
Yeah. And, even with every encounter, there is some sort of teaching or transmission that you're getting, because I have sat before teachers where I haven't had the chance to actually speak with them one-on-one, but I am speaking to them and they are speaking directly to me. There's something bigger that's happening.
And the fact that you had chosen to be there in that room with those teachers, it is the most powerful merits just to have shown up. And so, you receive all those blessings and the purification of just being in the space. And I can vouch for that, because I was always told that, but I started to really see that. And I really started to understand that really powerful transmission as I started to see how much I was absorbing it, whether I understood in the moment or not, and how much it was transforming my life and how subtle I was becoming, and it was just sort of that constant wanting to be there. And then like the wisdom, the information, the knowledge, like it just comes, and it's it becomes so clear, so clear. It's so hard to explain, right? Because
It is,
unless
yeah.
you really took in those steps and had like those times of being with these teachers, it's really hard to explain what that experience is like and that feeling and the shift the subtle shift, but yet huge in another way.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, after that New York experience, I was never the same. I could not. It's like there's no turning back. I was just reborn, completely reborn.
Yeah, I want to also talk to you about how the music industry and artists have really been affected by COVID and the pandemic, and music needing to find new and creative ways to be able to get to people. But before I ask you that, I have to ask you about the crystal behind you, because it's magnificent and beautiful. And is that an altar of yours, or is that clear quartz?
So, okay, originally when I had, I'll move aside, you can see, originally when I had moved into this space, this whole like structure was built because I wanted that to be the altar. And then as we lived here for a bit and we're walking back and forth, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is like the line that we're constantly walking back and forth in front of, and to get to the bedroom, to get to the living room, to the kitchen. And something in me said, no, that's not the altar space. You shouldn't be stepping back and forth like that. The altar space should be in an area that is a little bit more calm. So I changed my mind, and I thought, well, what the heck are we going to do with this? So my friend, Jeffrey, I don't know if you've ever heard out in Los Angeles, a store called Mystic Journey Bookstore.
Oh, yes, I have. Yep.
Yeah, it's been here for ages. And he has every spiritual book there, every mystical book there. He had like crystals and all such. But he started to get into mining more. And he opened up a crystal gallery here in Venice as well. And there are these just incredible pieces. And so he calls it Mystic Journey Gallery. So it's 2 places now. And we went in there, and I just like saw this piece and was completely drawn to it. And I just knew we had to bring it home, and we had the exact perfect place for it.
Perfect place for it. It's beautiful. Yes, I love it.
And as soon as we brought it in, it was one of the first things we moved in. It completely shifted the energy. We felt grounded. We felt, okay, this is home. I can feel it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I had to ask because I'm so drawn to it too. I'm like, oh, it's beautiful. Are there any crystals? Do you actually like have any on you when you're practicing or singing, or do you use crystals in a way to help facilitate the sound that comes out?
So it's a funny thing. Like I remember, especially, okay, as I was transitioning from like this performing for just a very straight mainstream audience, I felt like I was living kind of like these dual worlds. One was singing for the super mainstream audience. One was at kirtans and yoga festivals. And I mean, it was 2 completely different worlds. And I just always felt when I was out in the mainstream world, I needed to take a piece of this other world with me to kind of keep my vibration high, because the energy that comes back to you is just so different. And I knew that I needed a little bit of assistance too. So I always carried a little quartz crystal in my bra.
In your bra, yeah. We all have them in there, yeah.
I'm like, it's the only thing, I have no pocket. And so I would always carry it with me as just a reminder of why I'm there and what I'm doing. And no matter what I'm singing, no matter who the audience is, I'm here to serve, and I want to keep my vibration clear and high and always bring in that energy, no matter what environment that I'm in, because singing is my tool to connecting to other people and to sharing these blessings and gifts and knowledge and wisdom to them. So yeah, I would always carry a crystal with me.
Good for you. Yeah, I had a feeling when I saw the crystal in the background that she's got to carry crystals. I'm sure she does. All right, so let's talk to before we kind of end a little bit. And I also want to talk about what you're doing with your new album, because the piano accompaniment is just beautiful with your voice. I love the piano. I fall in love with anything, that I hear that is connected to the piano. But yeah, talk a little bit about how have you been kind of surviving as a musician during COVID times. And there's been, for me personally, a lot of grief because just communing with people to live music, it like cleans my soul. It washes me. I feel like I get a whole chakra clearing every time I go to a live concert. So it has been really hard as the listener and as the participant, not the performer, to not have that and trying to find ways to still experience that. Because listening to somebody, I'm sure listening to you through my speakers here is a totally different experience than when I am in your presence. Like you said, like hearing those opera singers. Went to the opera when I was in college. We had this humanities class and we had to go to the Met to experience the opera. And I was like, okay, I'm not really digging opera, but I'll see what, everybody loves it. And You're right. I was completely moved, didn't understand a word, but there is a presence and a feeling. And I know that the music community, musicians are struggling a little bit. They're trying to live stream. There are some facilities now. I can think like in the Palace Theater. I think that's in Schenectady, New York. They have musicians coming in and performing on stage, but it's still live stream. Can't quite get that full quality. So how has it been for you during the pandemic and not being able to travel?
The same thing, I guess. I mean, as a human being, as you can probably relate to, I mean, we know that this is happening again for a really major reason. We'll know more later too as we're going through it more. But I have to say, during the pandemic, it's been beautiful and absolutely sad at the same time. Beautiful in the way that it has given me this time to have the time to reflect and to really see things clear. I mean, when the years are going and you are just hustling through, it's intense. It can get very intense. And I mean, you're just acting off intuition constantly. You're like, okay, this is the next thing. Da, 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 da. You don't even have time to really, to really think. It's just feel and act and trust. This year has given me the opportunity to feel and act, trust, but slowly, and to really kind of rethink, reformat everything. So I'm really blessed for that because I have had many beautiful discoveries during this year.
Yeah.
Musically, yeah.
Yeah, I like that you said that because I've been wondering about the musicians that I love. And I also feel like, when I see people go on tour and like you're saying, it's just boom, the next, that I wondered if, the opportunity and the healing for the artists and the musicians is also a time to go within to create more and to just slow down.
So much. I bet you anything. When we look back at this time, just saving a couple of years or a few years from now, and we see how much beautiful art was created during this time, whether it be music or film or paintings, I mean, it's going to reflect what we had gone through. And those who are coming from a place of light, I mean, can you only imagine what we're going to slowly continue to discover through the years of what had been created during these years,
Yeah.
Because all of these hardships and, trivial times are going to inspire you, especially as an artist. It will transform you. So I do feel that in me. I absolutely miss singing for an audience because there's nothing that can compare to being connected to someone physically. At least in this dimension, on this realm, we like that. We like that human contact, that human connection. I mean, we can never compare to that. But for me, I really had to make do and get creative and do live stream things, collaborate. This last album, Illuminance, we all recorded remotely, but it made all of us realize that, wow, we can simplify things. Things can be simple and still incredible. Do we have to go and be at this massive studio anymore? And, it's so expensive. You have to get everybody down there. The whole organizational thing. I mean, the production itself can be really intense as well. There's something about recording from home, I do have to say, that is in your space, your comfort zone. You perform differently at home than you do in the studio. It's just obvious, So I think it's possible. So I'm happy about that. I do miss jamming. I miss kind of being in spirit with people next to me and all of that. But, this has taught all of us musicians and artists a lot, that we can still do this and we can still find ways to connect, and we are connected, and if anything, we're even more connected now because we don't take it for granted anymore. It's even more exciting. But yeah, I'm trying to get very creative. We don't know how much longer this is going to go on for. I do have plans to do some pretty big live stream events coming up in January, February. And my whole take on it is I want to still bring the magic. So I want to create something that will still take people into a place of magic and experience. So we have a really beautiful production coming up that I'm just really excited about.
Yeah, well, I think the show might actually come out around that time. So can you let people know where they can find your music, find you, your website? How do we listen to your live stream, and let us know about that?
So you can find everything about me and songs and music and albums from my website, sangeetakarmusic.com. You can find my YouTube page at Sangeeta Kaur Music, Instagram at Sangeeta Kaur Music, Facebook Sangeeta Kaur, and the live streams were most likely going to try to hit every platform. So if you can find me on any of those platforms, it should be there. And we are hoping to do this in the Lunar New Year. So the second new moon of the year. It happens to be the Vietnamese New Year as well. And we wanted to choose an astrological date that has meaning and power behind it. I wish I can share more information because it's
okay. But if we go to your website and we click events, that will have the
you will be able to find that for the live stream, and we will share more of that probably in December. You'll hear more about that.
Okay. And I just love the fact that you are a musician that plans around stuff like that. There's so much intent behind it, consideration and planning. So that is so awesome. Well, you have been a tremendous guest. My audience probably knows April loves her because I've spent a little more time with you than I usually do with some other guests. But, I have just a big heart for musicians in the world because music has saved my life on a numerous amount of occasions. It keeps me going. It is just so precious. And I just feel that people like you, I always say to people that have this gift, is that we need you, and I am so happy that you were so stubborn, that stubborn Capricorn that said, I'm doing this and I'm following it because we need it. And I really believe this is just my belief that artists, like yourself, are really here to help us heal. I feel like that there are people that are chosen for that role, to have that gift that can deliver, that can serve. Like you said, you're here to serve. And you're just so needed in this world. So keep singing. It is beautiful. You have a new fan here, and I hope all of our listeners become your fans. I know I'll be following you, and I hope that if the live stream works out and I'm free, I will be watching and listening.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This has been such a refreshing experience to be able to talk about some of these things with you. It's not often that I get to in some of my interviews, but with you, because it's podcast 11. I mean, come on, like we're able to share all of this. So I'm really grateful for this time, and thank you for having me.
Yes, you are welcome. You're welcome anytime. If you want to come and sing on our podcast for us, we'll take that too. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for listening, for tuning in. Please support her, support this beautiful musician, Sangeeta Kaur. Go to her website, download her music, and I will talk to everyone next time. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.